Hey everyone, and so welcome back to another video. And in this video, I'm going to be going over a make.com tutorial for beginners. So we're going to start with a general overview. And so if you haven't signed up for make.com yet, you can use my link down below to actually get 1 month free on their pro plan. So if you go ahead and click on the link, it's going to look like this: special offer, get your 1 month of the pro plan for free. And the pro plan is actually the one that I use. Okay, so it's 10,000 operations per month, starting at $60 a month for the entire year. Or if you change it to monthly, it'll be around $19. But you do get to try it out. And so 30 days should be enough time for you to actually decide if you want to try make.com or not. Now, when you sign up for an account on make.com, it's going to look like this page here. So you're going to see how many operations you've used, how many operations you have left, 26%. Data transfer, I don't really keep in mind. So with this tutorial, I do want to mention that this is going to be coming from a standpoint of someone who has no coding experience. There's a lot of people on YouTube who are so good at make.com. That's not me. I just use it for making my life easier. And so with no coding experience, the things that I look at is organization, how many operations I have left, when my usage was set. So I have about 10 days or so. Teams and users, you could actually invite users to actually use up your operations as well. Like in my case, I have invited my brother so that he can actually use some of my scenarios, just because I don't think there's been a time in which I've ran out of operations. Now, if you click on payments, you can see all your billings, installed apps. I don't really have that many installed apps. Variables and scenario properties, I don't really use it as well either. But with organization, I'd say the only thing I look at are the operations that have used and have left, and then also the scenarios that require attention. So the scenarios that acquire attention are usually scenarios that I've broken. But moving on from that, if you click on team, you can see how many operations me or my team have used. Now, organization and scenarios are basically the two tabs I use the absolute most. So if I go ahead and click on scenarios, you can see these are all the scenarios that I have running, and these are a bunch of the scenarios that I have turned off. I try to organize the scenarios. I don't think make.com's organization folders is the most robust system as far as organizing your scenarios goes. But you can see here I have organized based on scenarios that help me research topics, scenarios that help me script write, scenarios that help me upload. Then I have it based off of different YouTube channels of mine, or maybe people that I'm learning from. But if we actually hop into a scenario, let's go into one of my script writing scenarios, and we'll use this one here as far as the draft goes. A scenario is basically it's like a template. It's like a function. It's like one long function. So each scenario, usually I try to label my scenarios. Like if I input topic, I use an arrow that says a script comes out. So I usually title my scenarios based on what's the actual trigger and then what's the outcome. And then I like to put in brackets whether it's in draft or whether it's working. Those are usually my two bracket keywords to help me identify what scenarios are working or not. But over here, you can kind of get an overview of your scenario. On the right-hand side, you can see a history of when it's ran before. So the last time I ran this was about 4 days ago. Now, if you go ahead and click in, it's going to zoom you into your actual scenario. So common hotkeys that I use are Command S to actually save the scenario. I hold and drag to actually move around. So one click and drag around. To zoom in, I use 2 fingers to zoom in or not. Now, if you actually look at what a scenario is, it's just a chain of events, okay? So it starts from a left to right sequence, and it ends all the way down over here. This bottom part here is just a mock scenario that I used as far as a shortened version. So one thing to point out when it comes to learning make.com, okay? The reason why you're probably watching this is because you want to learn more about make.com, just like exactly how I was about 2 months ago. And as I mentioned before, I'm not the best at make.com. I really am not. I'm really not techie at all. But what I have learned is that you'll learn the most from make.com by just testing it out yourself. And this goes for anything. Basically, if you practice a lot, you will learn a lot from make.com. And so if we look at basically my scenario here, 2 or 3 months ago, I definitely would not be capable of doing this. But through a lot of trial and error, you will eventually learn make.com and understand how things work. So I'd say one of the key things is that if you click this run once button, the errors are inevitable. If you run into errors, those errors are going to teach you how to solve different problems in make.com so that you don't have those problems again in the future. But if we take a look at this scenario string down over here, this arrow indicator indicates that this is the one that's going to run if I click on run once. But if I go ahead and drag and drop this arrow over here, that means if I click on run once, this top scenario is actually going to run also. But let me go ahead and use this bottom scenario first. And as you can see, over here we have different modules. So modules are basically related to an app. So this is the Anthropic Claude app. Over here is a set variable module. Over here is an iterator module. Over here is a set variable module again. To add a module, you can either click on it, you can actually double click and then add a module. A lot of the times I actually clone modules. So if I clone this one, or if I know I'm going to be using the same AI prompts, I can clone this module. That saves some time. And then from a left to right sequence, we have the run once button, which basically just runs your scenario. So I click on run once, it's about to start my scenario. Scheduling just means if you're turning on or off your module, or if you want it on demand. Here we have the save. Here we have scenario inputs. Scenario settings, I don't really touch all too often. Scenario inputs, so with make.com, there's different ways that you could actually trigger a scenario. There's so many different ways. You can have it trigger based on an Excel sheet response. You can have it trigger based on someone filling out a form. For this scenario in particular, do take note that if I click on run once, it's asking for an idea. And that's because this scenario is based on inputting an idea and then a story script coming out. That trigger comes from the scenario inputs button where I input a structure and it says here idea and the type is text, and this is where I enter the value. So if I click on run once, let's say that I want a heartwarming story about a cat, and then click on OK. You can see that the kind of icon that's swirling means that it's currently running or currently working. And so we'll wait for that to actually finish. But from our left to right sequence, as I mentioned before, from scenario inputs, we have scenario settings. Notes, I don't really use all too much. Auto align just will align all the modules together in a straight line. Explain flow, I don't really use explain flow as much. You'll probably realize that a lot of this I'm really not using as much, but it's because I'm a noob. I'm really new to make.com, but at the same time, I'm not trying to learn every single thing about make.com. I'm only trying to learn the things that are like relevant to me. So another word of advice is that as you're learning make.com online and watching YouTube videos, there's going to be so many different cool things that you can do with make.com. But when you actually take a step back and actually try to understand like what you're about to learn, it might not even be relevant to your business or your task at hand. So don't be like me when I first started, where there was like so many cool things that I can do with make.com. But eventually what I realized is like a lot of these scenarios that are out on YouTube aren't even relevant to my type of business. What's important to note here is that each of these numbers indicate how many operations have been used. So recall earlier how I said that, if you sign up for the Pro plan, you'll be getting 10,000 operations per month. So over here, I already used one operation. Over here, I used another operation. Over here, I used 8 operations. Over here, I used another 8 operations. It can eventually start to add up as far as how many operations you're using. If you click on the number, one thing that's important to note is this input and output on kind of segregation, or basically separation. The input is what went inside and the output is what comes out. So if I click on content, you'll learn that you have to click on a bunch of drop-down menus to kind of understand what actually happened within that specific module. Let me actually show you real quick. So in this module in particular, the prompt that I give it is like write a full complete outline for a heartwarming story about a cat. And that came from the scenario input that I showed earlier. So you can see I gave it a template as well. And this is the outline that it gave. And the output was the outline that I gave based on the example. So a heartwarming tale of a cat's journey. First is the hook, then the humble beginnings, and the unexpected friend, then growing bond. If you click on each of these magnifying glasses, you'll see an input and then you'll see an output, and that helps you understand like what actually went inside and what came out. And it'll help you actually also diagnose where problems have occurred and such. For the final output that has come out, here we have a Google Doc, what went inside and then what came out. You can see over here is a web view link. So if I copy and paste this here, you can see that this is the heartwarming tale of a cat's journey. And so this is the output where actually through a series of prompts that you saw earlier, now I have a full story about a heartwarming story about a cat. What's important is that instead of clicking the magnifying glasses, if you click on each module, this is where you'll be actually able to tweak the settings. So here is the prompt that you saw earlier in the magnifying input prompt. So recall here, content, drop down, text. This is the prompt, and that prompt comes from the module settings here. So each of these modules all have their own specific settings. And again, I had no coding experience. I eventually just learned this. And I'll be telling you later on like what's the best way to actually learn make.com. But you basically tweak each module settings and then you run into errors. Make.com for me, in my opinion, is just a series of trial and errors. You try something, you run into an error, and then you fix it. And then you move further down the road in the scenario, but then you run into another error. And then so you try to fix it and then you run it again. And obviously there's like better ways to actually save operations, but because I don't really use all my operations, I don't mind all too much about how many operations I use. Now, what I do want to point out is the probably best way for you to learn make.com. As I mentioned before, it's through a series of trial and errors. You try something, you get an error, and then you try it again, and then it actually pushes through. And it's actually really exciting when you finally get a scenario to work after all those errors. But those errors, I'm telling you now, don't give up, they're inevitable. On top of that, ChatGPT is extremely good at helping you code. Okay, use ChatGPT to help write code. It's really accurate, surprisingly. So I recommend using ChatGPT to write prompts. If I go into my Anthropic Claude prompt, ChatGPT helped me write this prompt. ChatGPT helped me write this code. With that, the last thing is, basically 2 more points. Make.com actually also has something called Make Academy. So if you go to academy.make.com, it's a entirely free online course, okay? An entirely free online course with hours of material teaching you how to use make.com. I've only made it to like halfway through the intermediate section as far as understanding what different things mean on make.com. It's free to sign up. It's really easy to understand. There's quizzes at the end. I highly recommend it just because you don't have to pay for it. It's free and it's from make.com themselves. Now, the last point in order to learn about make.com is watching YouTube videos. With this scenario that you see here, this is like a combination of 4 or 5 different YouTube videos where the YouTube video will teach you a scenario. And so I basically combine bits and pieces of different scenarios until I come out with a scenario that I want myself. So that's a really good learning tip as well, as far as learning how to actually create scenarios yourself. It's not like I thought about this scenario myself. I definitely did not. This is like bits and pieces of different scenarios that I found on YouTube, and then I just combined it to make this one long scenario, which is the output that I wanted. With that, make.com, it is a learning curve, but don't give up just because make.com is going to save you so much time and energy, especially once you get the hang of it. I would say that the learning curve is exponential, where like at first it feels like you're making no progress, but once it clicks for you, it's just going to like make so much more sense. The next thing is be very cautious of what you learn on make.com on YouTube, just because there's so many different things you can do on make.com. It's like really overwhelming, but at the same time, you just want to also make sure that you try to learn the things that are relevant to your task at hand or your job or your business. As far as the rest of the tabs go, templates, I don't really use much. I mean, these can give you like ideas as far as like what you want to do. I really don't use this all too much. And then we have connections and webhooks are basically all the apps and webhooks that you connected to your make.com account. And resource hub, what's new? I think that's pretty much it as far as like a very general overview of make.com goes. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. But I hope you found my tips on how to actually learn make.com. Again, you just have to go through the trial and error process. Look at make.com Academy. This thing is awesome. Again, it's entirely free. And then watch YouTube videos and just combine different scenarios until you actually get the output that you want. That's all I have. And again, if you haven't signed up for make.com just yet, I highly encourage you to try it out and use my link down below to get 1 month of the pro plan for free. So you can get 30 days, and those 30 days should be enough time for you to actually at least get 1 or a couple scenarios out that can hopefully make your business life easier. So thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.